All right, everybody, this is part two of culture and socialization. In the last video, I talked about culture. This week, I'm going to talk about socialization. And I want you to understand that socialization is a process that we all undergo in our everyday lives. In fact, you may need to know this, you may see this on the exam. Socialization is a process by which we learn how to be human, or in other words, how we learn to function in society. I mean, we're learning the rules from the time we are born. In fact, in many instances, the rules are being transmitted to us before we were born. I do also want to mention that many of us, when we talk about socialization, many of us in sociology ask the question about nature versus nurture. Is it our genetics? Is it the nature that makes us who we are? Or is it the nurture, our learning, the environment in which we grew up? Fact of the matter is, I tend to believe that it's a little bit of both. I don't necessarily believe that it is one or the other. Rather, I believe that it is more along the lines of a combination. So where many sociologists or many people would say the question is nature versus nurture, my answer to that is it is nature through nurture. There are some people who have genetic predispositions towards certain behaviors, and those behaviors can come to fruition in certain environments. But that's just me. I do also want to talk about social isolation, which is very important, particularly if you are talking about the formative years of your life. Generally speaking, the first couple of years of your life, many sociologists, psychologists, we all agree that they are the formative years, the very first few years of your life are very important. And in instances of social isolation, I've incorporated several short videos here dealing with feral children. And one of the cases that you may have read about is going to be discussed in these videos. Jeannie, the wild child who was raised in isolation from a very young age up until the time she was about 12 or 13 years of age. And the question is, what kind of an impact would that have on a human being? And we see by looking at these cases, such as Jeannie, we see that the first few years of life are so important in development. And if a child is raised in isolation, those first few years, there are going to be a lot of physical, emotional, as well as mental problems. So that should tell you how important socialization is. Now, the agents of socialization, and I just want you to know that the agents of socialization is the term that I use that deals with the institution or the structures of society that actually socialize us. They teach us, if you will, because if you think about it, when you're born into this world, you are essentially a blank slate. And we learn how to be functioning members of a society by learning the rules and the expectations through these institutions that I'm going to talk about. These institutions that I'm going to talk about are called agents of socialization. And the first one, the most important one, is our family. Our family unit is the most important agent of socialization, especially in the very early childhood years. And if you think about it, that makes sense simply because our families are the people that we are going to be around the most. They're going to have the biggest impact of our lives. When we think about things that our attitudes, our values, our beliefs, many times they're going to be very similar to our families, especially the first few years of life, because we haven't had a lot of experience with interacting with other people or other institutions. We don't have that experience. And I will tell you that families do have long-lasting impacts on our values and our beliefs. But I will also tell you that the impact of the family grows weaker, it wanes as we get older and we are exposed to more agents of socialization and different agents of socialization. So just be aware of that. The family is the most important, the agent of socialization in the first few years of life, and it always is going to be important to some degree, but that importance is going to wane as we as we get older and are experienced to other agents of socialization, such as the schools. The schools are an agent of socialization. They teach us the expectations of society, or they are supposed to teach us the expectations of society. The fact of the matter is, in many schools, they are focused on teaching obedience to authority. They're focused on teaching adherence to a rigid schedule, being on time, civic engagement, things of that nature. We call that in sociology the hidden curriculum. Those are the things that are not necessarily the things that they're supposed to be teaching you, which, they're supposed to be teaching you the reading or writing and arithmetic, but schools also do a job of socializing kids into becoming functioning members of a society, or at least they're supposed to. And if you stop and think about it, this makes sense, because schools, teachers and the other students in schools, you got to understand you're going to be spending 40 hours a week or more at school for 9 months at a time. So be aware that they're going to have an impact. You're going to learn not only the academics that come along with education, but you're also going to learn the hidden curriculum that I mentioned earlier. There's also the issue of friends or peers. Peers and friends here, as you see here on this slide, often take over the role, and I'll mention this, they take over the role of the family as the most important agent of socialization right around 8 years of age. We tend to want to be accepted among our peers. Many of us do. We tend to want to be liked. And in some instances, that's a good thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that it's not. However, if the desire to be liked is extremely strong, we can call that peer pressure. And peer pressure can be negative. There can be some negative connotations that go along with peer pressure. For example, engaging in drug use or smoking or drinking underage. I will tell you this, that like the family, which at one point is the most important aspect or the most important agent of socialization in our daily lives, I will tell you that friends, peers, replace the family. But as you get older, the good news is that when you reach a certain age, and that varies depending on the person, but when you get older and you reach a certain age, the fact of the matter is what people think of you, what your peers think of you, tends to matter less and less. It seems to be extremely urgent in the young adulthood, particularly like I said, starting at about 8 years of age up until the teenage years. We all want to be accepted. My mother used to say to me, if Johnny jumped off a bridge, would you go follow? And I said, which bridge is Johnny jumping off of, Mom? The fact of the matter is that as you get older, that's going to change. It's going to get less and less important to you what people think of you. Also want to talk about the mass media and social media as an agent of socialization. We're looking at the mass media, and I'm talking about things such as television, movies, newspapers, books, storybooks, things of that nature, that are music, that are conveying ideas towards us, that are putting ideas in our head particularly about gender and race, also religion and politics, things of that nature. We'll talk about that in greater detail when we talk about sex and gender and race and ethnicity in this class. But just for now, know for now that the mass media, in my opinion, is the most important agent of socialization out there beyond any and all of them, because the mass media is impacting. I know some people go, well, Ed, you said that the family is the most important at a particular point in time. And I did. And you said, but peers are the most important at a particular point in time. And I did. But the fact of the matter is, the mass media is socializing your family and socializing your friends, who in turn are socializing you. In fact, I argue that you are socialized from before you were born, from before you were even brought out of the womb, particularly when it comes to gender roles and gender expectations. I mean, your parents, when they find out the sex of the baby, in many instances, they are going to pick out a gender specific name. They're going to pick out gender specific clothing for you to wear. They're going to pick out gender specific toys for you to play with. So these are some things you need to keep in mind, that these decisions are made long before you were even born, and you are expected to conform to them. Social media, on the other hand, is very important in our everyday lives. We see that a lot of what we call influences are out there telling us what to do, what we think should be popular, behaviors that are out there, political opinions, political beliefs. And I'll mention this to you. Your religion and your political beliefs are fine. They're individual, and there is, I'm not going to sit here and take a stand on any religious or political belief. But what I am going to say is, from the sociologist perspective, I understand that many people's political and religious beliefs during the first few years of their lives are probably going to be shaped by their family, and then ultimately their friends. But also, as we get older, the media, social media, tends to shape our political and our religious beliefs as well. I mean, we see that when we see the advertisements for the political offices that are being political offices that are being held in terms of an election, is what I'm saying. So just be aware of the importance of mass media and social media as an agent of socialization. Religion also extends into your adulthood. It does not necessarily mean that you are going to remain in that particular religion. But I will mention that, as I said, like your political beliefs, your religious beliefs growing up are primarily going to be shaped by your family. And again, that's going to often, not always, but often extend into adulthood. And I should point out here that it is very possible to change your religious beliefs once you get older, and once you have been more socialized, been exposed to different agents of socialization, although that is not necessarily going to be the case. I also want to mention something about a total institution, because here's the thing. Socialization is not a one and done process. It's not something that you do and you're finished with it. Because the fact of the matter is, we are constantly being re-socialized when we go to a new job, when we marry into a new family, when we go into, and we'll talk about total institutions such as the military. We are constantly being re-socialized, because we are expected to learn the rules of the road as we get there into these new situations. I do also want to mention a total institution. As I mentioned, the military is an example of a total institution. A total institution is where a person is re-socialized in a way that they do not have a great deal of autonomy. They don't have a great deal of say in how things are done. Basically, you have a lot to learn. You have a short time to learn it, and there are going to be some severe consequences if you don't catch on fast. The fact of the matter is, I've had students who were in the military. They've told me that you can make a civilian a soldier, but you cannot turn a soldier back into a civilian. Once you have been re-socialized by the military in a total institution, you are pretty much going to be that way for life. Just wanted to mention that to you. Prison is also another instance of a total institution. Again, it's like a complete culture shock, and we talked about culture shock in the last video. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of different rules to learn, and you're going to learn them, and there's going to be consequences if you try to express your individuality, if you catch my meaning. I also want to talk about roles and statuses, and I'm going to go ahead and start with the status. A status is simply a position that you hold. We all hold different positions. We all hold different statuses. There are three types of statuses with which I need you to be familiar. An ascribed status. An ascribed status is a status that is given to you. It is generally given to you or assigned to you at birth. It is very difficult, although not entirely impossible, to change your ascribed status. So when you think of an ascribed status, you need to think of things such as race, and you need to think of things such as sex, because it's difficult, although not entirely impossible, to change your race or your sex. An achieved status, on the other hand, is a status that you earn for yourself. This can be a positive thing or a negative thing. An achieved status could be something as simple as getting a high school diploma or getting a college degree. You have achieved something. No one has given that to you. You've achieved it yourself. And it is a status. It is a position that you hold. Finally, a master status is the most important status of all, because the fact of the matter is we all hold different statuses. We all hold different positions, and a master status is the status by which society is going to look at us the most often. It's the most important, and eventually it's going to change the way we see ourselves. Master statuses are problematic in the sense when we are talking about things such as a criminal conviction or a substance abuse problem, things of that nature. The fact of the matter is people are complicated, and they need to be, in my estimation at least, they need to be viewed as complicated beings. They don't need to be pigeonholed, if you will, as one thing or another, because we are all capable of positive change. And speaking of a status, I'm going to go ahead and talk about a role. A role is a behavior that is expected of someone based on their status. The fact of the matter is, you see here I've got a picture of the Rock. The Rock told people to know their role. Well, the fact of the matter is we all need to know our roles, at least to conform in society. The status is the position we hold. The role is the expected behavior that goes along with that. Now, the fact of the matter is as I said, there are many different statuses that we all hold at the same time. It's like wearing many different hats. There are situations that come into play where the expected behaviors are going to cause trouble. One of the expected behaviors from one status may conflict with the expected behaviors of another status, and sociologists call that role conflict. So for example, if you are a student, which is a status, and you are an employee, I know that many of you probably work, that is also a status. The expected behavior of being a student is to study, take your exams, turn in your assignments, the whole nine yards. But the expectations of being an employee are to basically do whatever your boss tells you when they tell you to do it. Okay. So the question is, are you going to study when you should be working? Those two statuses are coming into conflict with one another. We call that role conflict. Role strain, on the other hand, is a conflict within one status. The expected behaviors and what you think is a good idea are going to conflict within one status. So for example, if you are a if you are a student who's taking care of an elderly parent, this is particularly apropos for my age, but if you're a student who's taking care of an elderly parent, as a good, or if you are as a good child, as a good son, as a good daughter, are you going to um, are you going to uh, give up part of your life and help your parents to where they can uh, live independently, or are you expected to kind of push them towards assisted living if in the event that they are to not able to handle things on their own? See what I mean? With role conflict, you have the problem between two or more statuses. With role strain, it is in that one status. So be aware of that. Be aware of the differences, because you'll see that on your exam. Last but not least on this slide is role exit. I want to talk to you about what role exit means. Role exit means that once you no longer are in that status, the expectations, that behavior go away. You're not expected to do certain things. When you graduate college, for example, you are no longer a college student, which is a status. So therefore, you are not expected to turn in assignments, take tests, and things of that nature. When you quit a job, you are no longer expected to be an employee. You're no longer expected to show up on time and do whatever the boss in that particular job tells you to do. So you no longer occupy the status, so the behavior is no longer expected from you. That's role exit. And last but not least is role performance. I wanted to mention this to you about role performance. Role performance means that when we are engaging in, when we have a status, we are expected to perform the behavior to the best of our ability. That means dressing the part, acting the part, speaking the part, the whole 9 yards. In fact, many people would say that role performance, many sociologists would say that role performance is a lot like acting. And that's why I have this picture on my slide. Fact of the matter is, since role performance is a lot like acting, you could say that it is winning an Oscar. I'm trying to give an Oscar-winning performance, and well, if I have to win an Oscar, the little green guy in the trash can, Oscar the Grouch, is the Oscar that I would like to win. So that is all I have. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Please stop by my office hours, and I will see you online. Have a good one.